and he tried to end overtime pay if you go beyond the 40-hour work week, right? It's usually straight time, time and a half for overtime, and double time on weekends, holidays, and so forth. So he's catering, as this interesting outline says, Outback Steakhouse is benefiting Walmart and the rest of them. And Diabolorum is known to be a crony of the Walmart dynasty. So Hillary Clinton, if you're going to go to this Roosevelt Island event, Hillary, why don't you call for 0% interest on student loans paid for, mandated, coerced by an act of Congress? Although I would also hasten to point out, a real president, if we had a real president instead of this pathetic Obama, you could pick up the phone and say, Janet Yellen, guess what? You're going to become an idol for a generation of students. You're going to open a special $2 trillion refinancing facility. Every student loan goes down to 0%, and you'll hear the parasites squealing like stuck pigs. Hillary is seriously trying to tell us that 3.5% is progress. This is supposedly her attempt to placate Madame Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, remember, had, and we supported it as much as we could at the time, 0.75% paid for through the discount window of the Federal Reserve. That was a serious proposal. But as soon as the Democratic Party heard about that, Elizabeth was called to order, and she then went back to the 3.5%. The other question, in addition to the student loans being refinanced by the Fed, coerced, is the question of free college, right? If you put together community college plus state institutions of all types, that's got to be free. Who should pay? Well, Wall Street. The 1% Wall Street sales tax would be an obvious way to get a significant part of that money. So you put the proceeds from the tax Wall Street, the 1% Wall Street sales tax, that's part of it, and then the other part, the 0% student loans, which can also be used to live on, because you got to live on it too. So that is a summary of some of these things. Now we're going to try to get a report from Bilderberger here in the final segment. Welcome back to the final segment of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington, D.C. Now we have a rare treat. We are honored to be joined by Charlie Skelton. Charlie Skelton writes for The Guardian. That is the mainstream newspaper in London, right? The left-of-center Guardian. And in this case, he's a worthy representative. And he's also, in my estimation, he is now the dean of the Bilderberg experts, since he has been on this for The Guardian and for other purposes for quite a few years now. And Charlie joins us from Austria, where the Bilderberger Group is now taking place. Welcome, Charlie.
Hello, Webster. How are you?
It's great to talk to you. Now, you know us. We're interested in the ISIS czar John Allen. We're interested in Peter Thiel and his activities. We're interested in how many criminals were there. We in an early segment, I went through your article about how the criminals coexist with the ministers. Kravis Roberts, is Henry Kissinger there? What does he look like? You tell us what you think the leading points are.
Well, I mean, just on the subject of the criminals, I just had dinner with a former HSBC investment banker who was very amusing on the subject of their extraordinary power worldwide. And they're basically untouchable. Much as they get touched every so often by regulators around the world, like the Swiss regulators just fined HSBC something like £28 million, which they probably earn, every 3 seconds. So
that's on their petty cash account.
I think it is. I think someone just reached into their pocket and threw it out the car window at the Swiss. That's the cost of doing business. But it's I'm interested in HSBC. But you mentioned Peter Thiel. It's good to see him there. He's an interesting character. He's on his quest to live forever. He's one of these kind of anti-aging people. He finds death really an affront to his existence, and he's throwing a lot of money at that. And it's interesting when you look at the kind of AI subject on the agenda this year, with all the Google DeepMind stuff, and you see people like Thiel and Palantir's Alex Karp and stuff, and I never quite know where they're heading with AI, whether it's just them trying to merge with machines or just try and build something some piece of computing equipment that can possibly deal with the amount of data they're mining and sucking up and gathering from all the cameras and devices around the world. You get the feeling that the amount of data being sucked up is still slightly too much to kind of crunch. So I think Google's just trying to get to the point where they can understand everything.
But again, the thing that shocked us here was that even though Petraeus is now, I guess, a felon, right, having had to pay a fine and submit to, essentially parole, right, out on parole. Yeah. He's nevertheless, he's invited, right? He gets to come to this, and they have quite a few others. But now, the other thing that we're always interested in these years is do they express any kind of a tendency on the U.S. presidential election? Do they support the Koch and Koch approach, which is Scott Walker and union busting, pretty much overt fascism, or do they have something else up their sleeve? Any ideas?
I don't know. I mean, it was on their agenda that was discussing it, but I mean, I honestly don't, and that's so far outside my ability to speculate. But people often ask, what influence do they have in that direction? And it's quite hard to tell. And I guess it's the kind of thing you only realise when you look back. You tend to have to look back about sort of 4 or 5 years, and you go, "Oh, right, yeah, he was the young guy who turned up that year." So I don't know who the young guy who's turning up this year is. That young guy might be Jeb Bush. I don't know. He was in Berlin. There's that story floating around, but I'm not sure I believe that.
That's quite feasible. How about Greece? Is there a Greek delegation? Do they have anybody from Greece on the list?
Well, they do, but not who's actually a Greek participant.
So not the
politician.
Government. Sorry. Nobody from Syriza, not Tsipras, not Varoufakis.
No, I think they're the very last people to get an invitation. But it's definitely front and center of their thinking. Although I think probably they're more concerned as a group with the possible loss of the UK because from Europe with the referendum. I think that's a much bigger deal. Greece, I think everyone could kind of shrug off, but the UK would be an absolute catastrophic blow to the supranational hopes of these people.
Precisely, but we also think that any exit by anybody is going to start a disintegration process.
Absolutely,
How about Ukraine and Russia? Do you hear any vibes about that?
Yeah, I really don't. I tell you what, it's so hard. I tell you that my take on things this year is that I came from the G7 before arriving in Bilderberg. So, which is a bit like leaving a warm bath and jumping into an ice bath, and from my experience, I've just been at the kind of bad end of the stick when it comes to extremely heavy Tyrolean policing, and it's an extraordinary police and security operation this year, and it's made it extremely difficult to report on, and it's almost easier not to be here. Then it's at least calmer, but it's tough here. It really is. It's the toughest policing I've experienced since 2009 when I started in Greece.
Let me invite everybody to look at The Guardian, and Charlie Skelton's articles are all the rage. So you can the police harassment indeed very, very heavy, and people should read it. So they've actually succeeded in putting a kind of a smoke screen or an iron curtain around this gathering.
They really have, and it has something to do with the fact that the G7 occurred, about 20 miles away a couple of days earlier. So it was all part of the same security operation. And the G7 security operation was the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was like a war zone. It was an extraordinary event, and they basically shut down any possible protest. They didn't let it happen. It was a very powerful piece of policing.
So this is not like the American one, 3 years ago, where there was the driveway going in, and you could get within a couple of feet of these participants and maybe take their picture or scream slogans at them. This is no longer the case.
No, this is tough. And some people ask, why aren't there mainstream journalists covering it? And the answer is because it's quite hard, and journalists are incredibly lazy. And I've just come from the G7, where journalists are treated like the Queen of Sheba, and you're practically getting foot massages under the table. There's that much pampering of journalists, because the journalist's job there is to eat free food, drink free beer and wine, and to churn out the press release which is coming down from the Schloss at the top, and just to do their job, and just whereas here that job doesn't exist. Literally, I was told by a representative of the German government, we're here to make your life easier, and I cross the border and there's representatives of the Austrian government, i.e. the police, are just trying to make my life difficult. So it's an extraordinary comparison to have lived through.
Well,
it means I'm slightly dissociated from the actual nitty-gritty of the conference, because it's such an exhausting process just to sort of exist here.
And then how long does it go on, and what are topics that they still have to discuss, or they do put out some kind of an agenda, right?
Yeah, they put out their agenda, which I suppose is getting slightly bigger each year, but it's still slightly meaningless when you've just got NATO on it, or Iran, or Greece. Of course they'll be discussing Greece, but of course they will.
Okay, the music tells us that we are out of time. Charlie, we want to thank you. Maybe we can get you back here next week at this time, and you can give us a wrap-up, because the Saturday and Sunday parts are the main parts, and we haven't seen them yet. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
later.
And good luck.
Cheers, Webster.
Bye-bye. And we'll see you all next week on World Crisis Radio.